Hey, how you doing?
Hello, I'm alright. How are you?
Very well. Thank you so much for being here and being on the channel.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, it's great. It's, I think, really something very different for all the guitar people in the audience, hearing an accordionist come and play like one of the most most famous pieces of not guitar music because it's piano music, but
Yeah.
our piece. Like it's like you're sort of an infiltrator, an imposter.
I know. I'm feeling a bit daunting, a bit scary. No, it'll be okay. It's just funny because the piece is like written for piano, meant to sound like a guitar. But guitarists play it, and now I'm playing it as an accordion, trying to sound like a piano, like a guitar, and it's like, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much a sort of mission impossible, I would say. Like trying to be almost like two instruments and playing a completely different one. But you do an amazing job, and actually, I think what would be good to do right away is to just share a really small clip of you playing the Asturias piece now, so that people can hear it. And then at the end of the interview, obviously there'll be a link to the whole piece, and people can check it out and watch Val playing the whole of Asturias, which is the latest addition to Gallery of Guitar. So here we go. Now we're back. So as I said before, you can check out the whole performance later on. So I want to come to it right away, Val. It's obviously originally a piece of piano music, and like I say, it's synonymous with the guitar, and it's not just because of the Spanish idiom, the Spanish writing, but also the techniques that the guitarists employ when they play it. There's sort of like this rasgueado strumming, and there's loads of effects. And when you hear it on accordion, it's incredibly exciting and really powerful as well. But some of the things that are challenges for the guitarists, or some of the things that we do differently, you sort of come at them from a completely different perspective, and it's just amazing. So, like, can you tell me a little bit about how you came to play that piece? Like, why does an accordionist start playing Asturias?
Well, I actually initially knew the piece as an accordion piece because my teacher had it on his CD, and it was one of my favourite pieces from that.
Yeah.
So I always kind of knew it as an accordion piece, to be honest. Obviously, when I was a lot younger, you kind of didn't realise at that point either, like, where things can stem from as such. So yeah, I just one year, me and my teacher both decided, you can play that, that's great. And we got to work, and we were kind of lucky. There's already a kind of well-established transcription that has been published and written out by Friedrich Leipz, who's the Russian accordionist, and he's written a kind of catalogue of transcriptions, to be honest, of lots of things. So that is already kind of written out and worked out and everything, but obviously it was actually written for the button accordion, which has the buttons all on the right hand instead of like the piano on the right hand, which I have. So they're kind of different. I almost have to transcribe it again for certain things.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So what's different about that? Instead of having the keyboard, you have the buttons.
So
what's the difference?
Basically, they're all just arranged differently, and there are a lot more of them. It basically becomes kind of a mirror image of the right and left hand. It goes up chromatically, but it means you can kind of stretch for more. You can play a kind of bigger stretch of notes. There are just small differences. As a kind of classical accordionist and as a piano accordionist, a lot of things are written out for button accordions that maybe have big stretches that just aren't possible. So it's kind of up to you to transcribe that again, and kind of compress it a little bit. but make it
okay.
so
So you're sort of you're almost compressing the range.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, because it's a bit like on the guitar. It's funny. Like I remember like the first time I ever came to like a real classical music setting with the guitar, because guitar exists in like folk music, you know it, pop music, rock music, everything. And then suddenly you sort of rock up to like a music conservatoire or an academy with your guitar, and you're like, oh, okay, my instrument's 3.5 octaves, or like maybe 4 at an absolute push. Got some harmonics that extend it a little bit, and then you sort of walk in and look at the piano players, and you're like, okay, I play a toy. Do you know what I mean? I've got this little 10-inch, but like when guitarists start moaning about scales, I'm like, watch a harpist or like a piano player like trying to deal with scales, you know, and it's like incredible range and, you know, pedals and like
arms stretched right out in both ways. Like
I know. But so it's like, okay, so you're in a sense a bit like us. I mean, we have to sort of change the register of certain things. You know, we can't have the double octaves often that the pianists have in the left hand, you know, so we don't sometimes we're sacrificing like the density of the chord for the texture with maybe that rasgueado technique, maybe that effect, you know. I mean, now forgive me for my complete ignorance, but that's how I'm going to come at you. Like when you're actually essentially expanding and contracting whatever, is it bellows? What do you call that?
Yeah, absolutely right.
When you're doing that, I mean, is that you're creating effects with the sound as well, you know? I mean, that I was hearing that all the way through the performance. I was like, you're changing the colour of the accordion sound so much.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, one of our big kind of extended techniques, because obviously we need to, the bellows are essentially our lungs as such, so you can take it out so far and then you need to kind of take a breath and change the direction to then let them come back in. But obviously there's not just, you don't need to pull it all the way out or all the way back in, and the effects that you see kind of throughout the Asturias transcription is the kind of bellow shake technique, which is just, we see it as a kind of a, yes, that's one, we see it as the kind of tremolando effect, like on a strings, like where you would bow like
tremolos.
That. It's basically, we see that as the kind of same idea. But so obviously...
Would you use that technique in other pieces as well then? It's not just particular to Asturias, it would happen across most of the repertoire, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's in an original repertoire, it's there a lot. It exists in a lot because it's one of our kind of biggest effects, and you can really get a really strong sound out of it. It's not like you can just do it on one note and that's it. Like you can really go for full chords and using the whole range of the instrument, so it's like you can get some really, but also you can make it really kind of delicate with the like a lighter register, and so it's one of the kind of most versatile I say of the. It's interesting because
some of our techniques are maybe less malleable. I mean, the tremolo for sure, people can use that with different dynamics on guitar, and you sort of, you know, through, you know, thousands of very, very short notes, you create one effect of a long note. You know, it's like the tremolo seems to be like the great sleight of hand, the great magician's trick, really. But with the rasgueado, when we play the chords, it's such a demonstrative technique. One of the main things I noticed, or not main things, there's so many things I noticed, but when we get to the bits, you know, essentially where there's the big B minor chord, and then you come back to, I don't even know if you're playing at the same key as us, but...
No, I was just about to say we're in G minor. There's a guitar in E minor.
E, exactly. So, you know, we start off with the E, and then we're coming to the B for the chord. And then, of course, the chords then change. But when we do the rasgueado, it's such a demonstrative technique that essentially, you know, you're sort of turning your wrist and flicking the fingers across the strings, which gets that really powerful sound. But it also... naturally it takes your hand really quite far away from the instrument, so then you've got to get back to that ostinato, and you've got to get back really quickly. And you know, there's so many great recordings of this on guitar, and some people like sort of embrace the gap, and they're like, okay, I'm going to play the rasgueado and make most of that and then come back. So it's almost like you're adding a fraction to the bar, a sort of pausation after the chord. And other people try, a bit like it was easier for you to do, I think, on the accordion, that's just completely there. So you have the chord, and then you're straight back to the ostinato. And that's very, very effective. And that's one thing that when I hear pianists play it, I'm like, damn, I wish I could sort of come back as quickly after the chord. And it's just the nature of how you're interpreting the piece and what you're doing with the colour of the sound. So it's like you transcribed it twice, basically. You transcribed it, or transcribed from the transcription, which is kind of amazing. And so, right, so just like, can I just say it's one thing that it might help people contextualise it. So Valerie was a student at where I teach at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, and also her accordion teacher used to teach next door to my teaching room when I taught at the Junior Conservatoire. This is a few years ago now. A good well. And I always used to hear this accordion student next door, and I thought, very, very good, very promising. And then lo and behold, all the way through undergraduate, all the way through masters, you've never left. Can't get rid of you.
Trying to get rid of me, I just keep coming back.
I know. But it was great. I mean, and I had guitar students that knew you and all that sort of thing, and it was such a nice connection. So when you're just so people know, the keyboard department, the accordions were part of that at the conservatoire. So in terms of the discipline, you were considered a keyboard instrument. So when you played, did you ever play Asturias in a keyboard masterclass or in a keyboard performance class? Or see it played, or
I don't think I ever played it in a performance class, because I think I played it for my undergrad edition, and then I think I played it again in one of my recitals, but I never managed to do it in a performance class. But I did hear it. Someone played it in a performance class. A pianist played it in a performance class one time, and it was interesting because I hadn't seen a pianist play it actually. Obviously, I've seen YouTube videos and everything, but I've never seen a pianist play it live. But coming back to what you were saying about I've forgotten the name of the technique that you use.
Raschiado.
Coming back to that technique though, but pianists also, if you notice, when they play those chords, they have to like really go out and then come back in, and it's, I don't know, it's a big distance to do as well. And I remember in that performance class we were discussing how much do you take, it's that whole thing of taking ownership of the gap. And I think when I was making my transcription, I had the element of that. I'm just thinking, well, guitarists can take a good while to do that, and pianists can as well. So I'm just like, why not make it a feature in mine? And like, I kind of try and spread the chord a bit as well, so that you get that strumming effect as such. So it's all about kind of making decisions. I could have gone straight for it, and maybe it comes across more straight than I feel like it does. I don't know, but
well, probably to a guitarist who's used to the time, being there and used to the battle that gets. I mean, guitarists are always sort of fighting amongst. We only have 6 notes that we can play at the one time. I remember playing some really difficult contemporary piece to a composer in Austria, and he had a 7-note chord. And I joked, I was like, this is a bit stupid, isn't it? And he just told me to practice. And I just like sort of sheepishly walked away, just like put in my box. But it's like we have such a limited amount of pitch that we can actually create any one time. And then of course, like, we don't really have 6 digits to play each of those 6 available pitches. So we have to, bounce our thumb around, do all sorts of crazy things. And guitarists do therefore play with time quite a lot, and you get some guitarists who, it's like they're sort of desperate to be. It was a bit like saying, when you come to an academy or a conservatoire, maybe as a guitarist, and I think to maybe a certain degree as well as an accordionist, you're like, oh, where do we fit in this orchestral tradition and this piano tradition? And sometimes guitarists go quite, not aggressively, but they go quite directly to, I want to be accepted, so therefore I'm going to try and play like all of these other instruments do and how they're approached. And sometimes then, so you're struggling to play that chord in time, and then jump to and all around you everything's falling apart, but hey, I managed to keep that gap small. I know, exactly. So I'm going to pin my... Exactly.
That in a piece of just like, if I get that one jump, then I will be so happy, and it happens. Doesn't matter what happens to the rest.
Exactly.
As long as you get that.
Makes no musical sense, exactly. And I've died on that hill. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's me, So we get a bit of that, I must say, and it's quite funny. But so, like, as an accordionist coming into somewhere like RCS, like the Conservatoire, obviously you were at juniors, so you would have been sort of eased into it a little bit. But like, did you? I mean, I wonder if you felt a little bit like some of the guitar students did. It's like, what was the environment like for you as an accordionist?
Yeah, so when I started, I was one of 3 people in the department. There was someone in the year above and someone in the same year as me, so it kind of felt, and a lot of the time you would find no one had heard of classical accordion at all, and you felt you kind of had to justify yourself the whole time you were there. They're just like, so what do you do? And I was like, oh, like, I play classical music, you know.
Explain this again.
I know that's it. So a lot of the time I did kind of feel like I had to kind of prove something to everyone else, which maybe I should have kind of stuck to my guns more, but a lot of the time I would try and play more kind of transcriptions and kind of music that wasn't as heavy, if you know what I mean. Just more pleasant to the ear, more audience friendly, just to kind of feel like I was trying to lure people in. Like anytime I played, it would be people's one chance to hear classical accordion.
So you want to make a good impression, of course. I felt like that kind of throughout, but as the years have gone on, the department's kind of grown more, and it's a lot more visible now as well. Like, and we've had, because of that, we've had a lot of support in the department, and more performance opportunities coming up. So that's great.
I feel like the department is more visible now. Maybe I'm saying that as an accordionist, no one else has a clue. But
but you're trailblazers, you know. You're sort of, you know, it's like you're, you know, you're sort of essentially brought into another department, and then you're, you know, you've got to fight a little bit, and you know, it's. I think within departments where instruments have traditionally always resided, there's probably gripes, you know, because if you play the contrabassoon, you play the contrabassoon. Do you know what I mean? You know, so it's like, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. All the contrabassonists out there who are not watching this are up in arms. Do you know what I mean? But it's like, you know, you're all the amazing thing I think about sort of guitar and accordion is they can do so many of the things that the piano can do. They can do it with a lot of different colour, but sometimes we still feel a little bit on that. It's like a little bit of an inferiority complex that we sort of have to deal with. It's interesting you saying, you know, it might have provoked you occasionally to think, I'm going to capture the interest of the listener here and you know, play something that's really going to, you know, captivate them and capture them, and before maybe getting to something that you maybe artistically wanted to do, you know, which is, it's a battle, you know, we all kind of face that a bit.
You feel, you kind of feel like that constantly. Sometimes I get really quite fed up with it sometimes. I'm just like, oh, why can't people accept this? But you know, that doesn't help anything. So you just need to be kind of willing to, not to educate people as such, but just willing to be open to how people are going to react. And
well, when you hear like you playing Asturias on an accordion, and you're thinking somewhat like a pianist and somewhat like a guitarist, and it's a transcription that then you've looked at yourself and made adjustments to, it still sounds incredibly right. It just sounds really exciting. All the musical principles are there that we need, the technical rigors there. I mean, it sounds incredible. So it's like, in a way, and that's why I really want guitarists to listen to it as well, because it will give them a different look at it. You know, they're always comparing themselves to the piano, and they're sort of thinking, well, this is our piece now, you know, we've stolen it. And I'm like, actually, you might find it sounds really good on some other instruments too. I mean, I've even heard a violinist playing one of our famous tremolo pieces, Recuerdos de Alhambra by Tarraga. It's another Spanish composer. Yeah, it's a tremolo piece, like you were talking about, this sort of bellow shake. And I've seen, you know, pianists do some barrios. It's a Paraguayan composer. So I've seen other instruments like stealing or borrowing our repertoire, but I don't think they feel the same sort of like shame going and taking the guitar piece off the shelf as we do when we're like, I'll try that, you know, I'll have a go at this. Like,
I think it comes from the minority kind of point of view, because, well, classical guitar, it goes back further in history, obviously, but the kind of pushing the boundaries of the instrument has obviously come a lot later, and compared to that, classical accordion is extremely young. Only within the kind of last century is the instrument anything like what it is today. So there's not a lot of repertoire to choose from, and that's just it. So it's that whole thing of expanding the repertoire. And you know, like if you had the bookshelf of original accordion repertoire compared to piano, say, that has centuries worth of books and books, and like all the kind of mainstream composers writing for piano,
and concertos as well.
Concertos, that's it. And that's something that accordion just hasn't had. Luckily, at the moment, there's more and more being done. It's not as if it's kind of dead in the water. But in a lot of other countries, it's certainly more developed than it is in the UK.
Oh, okay.
So like in Scandinavia, Russia, obviously, in Eastern Europe, all these places, it's really more accepted. And I think in Lithuania, they've had like Lithuania's Got Talent. I've had 2 accordionists that have won it in the last few years and everything like that. So it's like it's a lot more certainly visible and more accepted in a way.
That's interesting, So even just culturally, it's maybe more prevalent in the society, it's more prominent in the music just generally. I think guitar probably has an accordion obviously is so synonymous with folk music in Scotland and Ireland and things, but and that's another thing as well, like sometimes we call ourselves classical guitarists, and I always wonder why we put that word in front, because 9 times out of 10 I go to a classical guitar recital and I hear a bit of like sort of quite cheesy contemporary music, I'll hear some like really early music, I'll hear a little bit of classical music probably somewhere, but we use this term as if like that's us then, that's the classical one. I'm not an electric guitarist, I'm not a folky, and I find it such a bizarre word that we label in front, That's
it. No, accordionists do exactly the same. It's just that anytime if you're like, what do you play? I'm just like, I'm a classical accordionist. I always feel the need to put classical in front, just because usually over the years if I say I play accordion, they're like, oh, so you do Cayleys and stuff then? And I'm just like, I've never actually played a Cayley in my life. Not a full one anyway. But it's just the whole thing that you feel the need just to put that in front. I don't know.
It's
kind of push the label.
It's an interesting one. It really is. So look, to come back to Asturias, I was intrigued as well, not just by how you deal with the chords and the sort of fast ostinato at the start, which everybody will hear. It just sounds incredibly exciting on accordion. The middle section, then you have something that we do not have at all, and I was like, the whole middle section is explored in a very different way to how the guitarists do it. When we hit a note, essentially it's decaying. We can't blow more air into it. We can't keep it going. It's just we maybe play a little bit faster because we know the notes are going to decay. But you have just a lot of space. I mean, there's a huge amount of space and time you can take because there's sustain really.
Yeah, that's it. That's what a lot of pianists always say to me, is just like, I wish so much we could like sustain notes and crescendo through notes and stuff like that. So I feel that's one thing when I kind of look at these, when I'm looking to transcribe pieces, I kind of look for areas that maybe have been written because they know the instrument can't sustain, so you think, right, well, how would that then change, or would I necessarily repeat that note? Just because and sometimes like notes are repeated across bars just so that they sustain throughout, and it's just sometimes you need to ask yourself, well, do I just hold that on then?
Exactly. I have this choice available to me that they don't.
But I mean, what goes hand in hand with that is also that none of our sound sustains. As soon as we take our hand off the note, it doesn't ring any longer. So that's something that we're jealous of guitarists and pianists for, because pianists can put the pedal down, guitarists
open strings,
they can ring through, but as soon as we leave the note, that's it. So there's a lot there is compromise made when you want to make that effect, and you're like, well, what notes do I hold on there?
When you come to cadences as well, things like suspension and resolution and all that sort of thing, you must be very careful with, the effect is now not so important because I've got to make sure the harmony comes to a conclusion or not, or whatever's happening with the harmony. But so it's quite interesting there, because I mean we have a lot of fun with open strings in guitar. Too much sometimes, where you listen to it and you go, it's just too much. I don't know what the bass line is, because it's just too much over ringing and over resonation and stuff like that. A bit like when you hear a pianist and you go, could you please take your foot off the pedal, because it sounds like I'm on a cruise ship.
This is a scary bit, just shove it down and whatever happens over the top.
Exactly. It's got stuck. Can he lift it off? If I can take you back to the middle section of Asturias, I was sort of struck by how different that was as well, in comparison to guitar performances. I sometimes feel with guitar, we get to the middle section, we want to contrast the outer exciting stuff that's happened, but it gets a little bit chopped up, a little bit bitty, and I think it's maybe the way we deal with the octaves. You can deal with octaves on guitar, sort of sliding them on the top, the first and the third string, or you can go across and use, like, this is so technical, the fourth and the first, and mix the steel up with the nylon, and some people use that as a sort of squeak when they shift and stuff. There's all sorts of ways you can come at it. But what I was struck with on yours is it was really linear, so it had this really nice dialogue, this nice shape, and I wondered, where were you coming from when you were sort of trying to think about the interpretation of the middle section?
Yeah, so I mean, when you look at the middle section, you can see it has kind of contrasting groups of bars. You feel like it could be really split up. Each kind of phrase is an individual thing in its own. So you can acknowledge that, but then try and link them all together.
Yeah.
Because they are quite different musically and kind of emotionally in their own way. So it's just finding a way of seeing how they link, like cadentially and like harmonically and everything like that. So it's just a case of kind of finding a way through and finding that image that takes you through it. So I guess I kind of see someone kind of walking along and having kind of an internal kind of monologue and having a kind of different thinking about something and going through different points of view with it and tackling it from kind of different emotional points as such. So
like it's an internal conversation almost with yourself, where you're sort of reasoning through these different ideas. Okay, it's interesting. So.
But as well, because it is so contrasting with because I feel like the outer sections are very much kind of like attacking as such, and they're quite what's that word?
Well, they're punctuated.
Dry,
they're
articulated.
Yeah.
So the middle section is kind of an opportunity to, as you say, to kind of contrast and maybe see it more as a kind of singing nature. Yeah,
that comes across really well. I mean, it's interesting. It's something that, I think after all of that activity in the first part, sometimes, so when I'm working with students with it on guitar, they're just stuck a little bit because they get to the end of that first section, and then you're like, okay, now here's a really interesting opportunity musically to do something very creative, and it's like, I'm gubbed. I'm done. Do you know what I mean? Like I gave everything in that first bit, and now I'm just going to kind of play the notes, Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and finding that it's a bit of restraint, and then that internalization of the ideas. It's interesting. I find it. It's really contrasting what the accordion does, or what you did certainly on the accordion at that point. So what other things do you transcribe then? So I mean, it's not just piano music from Spain. What else gets transcribed for accordion?
So we end up transcribing a lot of Bach and early keyboard music, Scarlatti sonatas, and pieces for Cochran and Rameau. Pieces for
guitarists are just going, we're the same. I mean, it's like Bach violin partitas, cello suites. I mean, the inventions work on two guitars, and some keyboard music comes across the guitar, but it's always a bit more of a struggle probably than it is for the accordionist. But then when you said Scarlatti, Cochran, Rameau, this is like what all guitarists do.
Classic. I think because they're relatively, I don't want to say this, relatively not complex, but texturally they're not too complex, so I would imagine it would be the same with guitar. They can translate actually quite easily,
some of them
without having to do anything really to them.
Not too much. I mean, sometimes a little bit of registration difference just because of the octaves, but then I mean, Scarlatti sounds great, often because Scarlatti was using some of these, traditional Spanish, there's a bit of fandango in there, there's some of these rhythms are really quite Spanish, and they translate well to guitar. Cochran too works nicely. And Bach is successful in some ways, and then sometimes frustrating in others, some of the transcriptions we just love playing it, so we sort of keep doing it, you know. And sometimes I'm going, does this really do much, you know? Is it any better, you know? But you know, everybody has to play Bach, so it's like we can't.
That's
not,
it.
you know?
Everyone has to experience it some way. Like
Exactly.
really.
I know.
I know.
I know.
No, but a lot of the Bach things as well, because we can deal with different. I've not really talked about registers. The kind of different kind of like organ stops. We've got kind of preset registers that change the colour.
Okay.
So I will have done that a few times. You can see them, like the kind of buttons on the side. You'll see me do that, or like ones on the chin. You can press there to just kind of change the colour, like add in an upper octave or like a lower octave or something like that. But because we can do that, the accordion can sound a lot like an organ at times. In fact, the biggest compliment I've ever had was I was playing a concert in a church and I was like warming up and stuff, but the church was still open to visitors, so some people come in and were just like, oh, I thought the organ was playing, and I was like, yes, thank you.
I can retire now. That's me.
That's it.
I've sounded like an organ. Yeah.
That's it. No,
again,
but,
some guitarists would be like, if they sounded like a piano player, they would retire. You know, that would be their dream.
Yes.
You know, and I'm sort of like, I think you should sound like a guitarist first. You know, but it's interesting.
I know, that's it.
Yeah, that's okay. So that obviously so you're sharing quite a lot of similarities about the sort of type of things that a lot of guitarists would transcribe or play transcriptions of, certainly, the early sort of keyboard music. And what about, can you do maybe more romantic music as well, and late romantic music?
I mean, it's more tricky because obviously as piano developed and kind of developed a sustain pedal, that very much opened up what a piano can do. And like, for example, just spreading massive chords and going down, it just doesn't work the same.
Chopin and Rachmaninoff.
Yeah, it just doesn't work the same. I mean, there have been transcriptions that have been done, but are probably quite fiendish to kind of get around. And I mean, I guess you could potentially transcribe anything. Because when I transcribe something, you always kind of need to listen to it first rather than just work from the score, because then you get the idea of the music as a piece and not as a piece written for piano kind of idea. So it's always that idea of you want to create a piece of music that sounds like it's written for your instrument, and you don't think, oh, that sounds not comfortable on the accordion. So that's always the aim, I guess, when you kind of try to make something.
Was that a process of discovery, and like, did you get taught how to do that, or did you just kind of learn how to do that, the idea of thinking about a transcription?
A mixture of both, because usually, because I feel like when you're an accordionist, the process of transcription starts when you're really quite young. So my teacher, we would sit and go through a piece together, and we go, oh, well, this doesn't work, so what can we do instead? What sounds like it? It's like, can you take one of these notes in a different octave? It's, you can ask yourself, what can I do without sacrificing the kind of musicality? There's some points you kind of have to sacrifice the technique, but it's not a technique that's written for your instrument anyway, so you want to always keep intact the kind of musical intention of it. So if that has to change, if you need to take notes out, as long as it sounds good, then I don't see why not, because I know some people go, oh, we've taken loads of notes out there. Course, that's
sacrilege.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, if it works and it doesn't take away from what the piece is, then why not?
I think hopefully I've seen a little bit maybe in the last 10 years, even just of education, we're starting to see a more open mind towards transcription, and less that like it's going, you know, some people are going to like, I mean, people are always going to have a problem with it, they have a problem with it, but some people have definitely, well, I've seen a general switch towards, okay, the possibilities are very different musically, like seeing things in a less traditional, less narrow sort of minded format, like it should be like this, I perceive that it has to sound like that, you know. I mean, we're both in Glasgow, funny enough, even though we're doing this on Zoom because of a pandemic. Or we're not. You're not in Glasgow, are you?
I'm not in Glasgow. I'm in Wishaw.
Oh, you're away outside.
We're in Wishy.
Very nice. So. But we have.
Is it?
We have a great gallery here, you know, Kelvin Grove, which you know well, I'm sure, Kelvin Grove Art Gallery Museum. And one year, they put no descriptions beside all of their artifacts and artworks. You know, it was just for a small period of time, but it was like, it wasn't everything, but you were then provoked to actually look at the piece of art rather than look at the little plaque beside it and then talk about what you know about it because you've just read it off a plaque. Like, you know, you were actually, and then have all those, you know, all the way that makes you think. If you suddenly go, oh, that was painted in this period, and that artist was buddies with those artists, and they're all from that teacher, and
like, you know, I see that now that I've seen that written down.
So and this is the way it should be seen, you know. And I really like sometimes when something's just presented, and then you make of it what you make of it at the time, and you sort of use the tools that you have. And it's interesting, you were guided through, you know, transcription, so it wouldn't have just been a thing to deal with. It would have been something that you worked on sort of organically with the teacher. And I mean, sometimes I think guitarists don't know they're playing transcriptions, you know, and we sort of have to then go to that and sort of think, well, if you're going to start even this process, here are some good tools to use. Here are not rules, but taste, you know. And like you say, not blurring or even destroying to sometimes the actual point musically that was going on. It's really interesting. I hope transcription is comes full circle and it's seen as a very positive thing, as I think it was way back. You know, if you look at early music, when people when Bach was going, I've written this on the organ, and it also works on the, you know, a smaller instrument like clavichord, or it works on, you know, and just taking music and trying it in different formats and different ways.
Composers have done it throughout with their own music and with other people's music, but you're just, I don't know if you're resigned to thinking, oh well, that's okay because that was them, so they're allowed to do that. But, but
often they were performers too, though. You know, they were also players. You know, and sometimes we get given scores now by contemporary composers, and we feel like, where do I do anything, because everything's written on here. You know, it doesn't need to really be me that's doing this. It could be a machine if you want, because where do I take any ownership of this? Like, you know, it's interesting. A little bit more trust sometimes would be quite good, because I think we're very trusted in early music and in Baroque at that period in time. Maybe less so now sometimes with classical contemporary music. You know, I sometimes feel like I get my instructions and then I go and do it. You know, it's like,
do not deviate.
Exactly. So what else is going on with you just now? What else are you practicing apart from Asturias, which is amazing and on the channel now? What else are you working on? And
due to the pandemic and having an abundance of time, I've kind of taken the opportunity to go back and kind of revise a lot of my old pieces that I've learned, and stuff that I've only maybe performed like once or twice. Just to kind of get those back up again, just because of due to time, you kind of rush to get it ready for one thing, and then I don't know if you kind of skip bits in the learning process, but then you never really come back to it again. So I'm kind of taking the opportunity to come back to stuff like a couple of Shostakovich preludes and fugues, which are, some of them are so beautiful, so they can be really interestingly kind of put. What else am I doing? More Scarlatti. I feel like I play a lot of transcriptions, and that's
of course.
Like, it's transcriptions are such a big part of the accordion repertoire, so you always feel like the need to do more and more.
So Wishaw is kind of full of the sounds of Shostakovich and Scarlatti right now, which is good.
Sorry, neighbours.
I don't know, I think my neighbours have heard like the whole 19th century guitar repertoire in the last 12 months. They must just be like, really, could you start doing something else? Like, you know, is there any more of this?
At least it's not as loud, though. You should probably stay up quite late practicing guitar, but
yeah, I would have done most of my work in the wee small hours of the morning, definitely, for sure. That was one benefit. I didn't play the trumpet.
Very jealous.
It's good, I know. Well, listen, Val, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for recording Asturias for the channel, and I'm sure I've put lots of guitarist noses out of joint, because in this Curator series, I'm saying, if I ask you to come and curate a piece of the channel, you can choose any piece you want, and I'm sure there'll be quite a lot of guitarists out there like, you let an accordionist play Asturias for guitar.
I'm sorry, everyone.
Now you see, there's method in the madness.
I
think everybody will get something very very new and fresh out of a piece. It's, you know, it's well known in the guitar world. So thank you so much, and also thanks for sharing all of your thoughts about just, you know, studying and transcription and where you come to musically with a piece that's very close to our world, and you know, you do some really interesting things with it, so it's fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you very much.
And I'll hopefully see you soon in like the real world.
I know. The last time I bumped into you was you were drinking beer outside a pub.
Yeah, I know. Well, maybe get to drink beer outside a pub again sometime soon. You never know.
Summer's coming.
Cool. Anyway, thanks again.
No, thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers.